Hey guys, and welcome back to a new video. Today I just wanted to do a quick video for you guys since I've actually been getting some questions about how you can prepare your samples and loops for placements. So today I'm just going to show you exactly the way I do it. So I just have to tell you guys, so there's probably not 100% correct way to do this. I know lots of people that do it in a different way from me, but this is just what I found works for me. And there are some things you guys need to be doing if you want to get a higher chance of getting your loop placed. So I just made a quick sample for you guys. So let's head over to FL Studio and I'll show you guys what I mean. So I just made a sample right here and I'll give you guys a quick preview of how it sounds. So that's pretty much how the sample sounds. Now I firstly want to go through the arrangement. So I know a lot of people arrange their sample in different ways, but first things first, you can see we definitely have several different parts in the sample. If you're sending out samples for placements in like weeklies or monthlies and so on, and you want to get a higher chance of getting a placement, just make sure that in the first part you have the most catchiest part of the sample. Producers aren't really going to listen to your whole sample, so it doesn't even matter if this section sounds nice or not. If the sample can't catch the producer's attention in the first 5 seconds of the sample, is probably not going to use it. So that's pretty much the main thing for the structure of your sample. Now again, if you want to land placements, you definitely need to have good sounding samples. So make sure you guys put in the work. Producers aren't really going to use samples that don't sound nice. So make sure you guys have your samples on point. Now I have this part with a flute right here, and I have this part with a vocal. But I definitely like the flute part way more than the vocal, and the vocal part is definitely a bit more calm than the first part. So I'm definitely going to have the flute part here first because it's a bit more catchy than the vocal. So now for the rest of the structure, I basically just have an A part right here and a B part right there. It's a pitched down and a pitched up version of the vocal. And for the last part right here, I basically have the most simplest version of the sample. It's just the guitar with a synth and also the sub bass. Now, since I have a sub bass in the sample as well, I'm actually going to copy the whole part that we have already made and just delete the sub bass from this part. This is just in case the beatmaker actually likes the structure we already have, but he doesn't want to EQ out the sub bass and so on. He can just use this part instead of this part right here. So now we have the basic arrangement down like this. Now a thing you guys definitely need to be doing when you're structuring your samples is make sure you leave the stems of the sample at the end. This is because if the beatmaker really likes the sample but he wants to adjust on the structure, he can do so freely. So make sure you guys leave the stems at the end. So the way I like doing this is actually by copying the guitar over here. You can see I always leave like a full 2-bar pattern right here before the first stem starts. Then for the second instrument, I'm just going to leave 1 bar like this in between each one of them. So then you can just copy each instrument 1 bar apart. Now on the vocal, I have one pitched up version and one pitched down version. So I want to have it played twice. And then we have the texture at the end right here. Now the way I like going about pitching up and pitching down sounds is just by using a sound shifter on your channel rack. So I've just turned it off completely right now. It's going to right click it and create an automation clip. Then I'm just going to pitch this one up. Same with this one right here. So now you can hear the difference in the vocals on the first part and the second part. So now we have the complete structure of the sample. So the next thing I like doing now is rendering out the whole sample in a WAV file inside the project. So then you can play around with the pitch and also add some effects on the master. So one thing I'm personally doing when I'm making the sample, I'm actually having a sound shifter on the master so I can pitch it down, up and see what type of sound I like. But since I'm doing this, the sample is actually not in the E minor key since I've pitched it down 2 on the master. The sample is actually being played in D minor. So if you're doing the same thing, you definitely want to make sure to delete this sound shifter from the master first. So now that I have deleted the sound shifter from the master, I'm going to do one last thing before I render it out. I'm actually going to tag out my stems. This is actually a super cool trick you guys can be doing. I barely see any producers doing this, and this is actually super nice for beat makers. So I'm firstly going to show you guys how you can tag your stems, and then I'm actually going to explain to you guys why it is so helpful when your stems are tagged. So if you want to tag your stems, you just want to put this green marker on the part you want to tag. So the way I go about tagging my stems is just putting a tag all the way to the left at 0, 0. The way you tag, you just hit Control on your keyboard and then you press T. That's going to make a tag right there. And then I want to put a marker or tag each first part of these stems like this. So just hit Control T on each part. So now you can see we have marked each part of the stems. So now I'm just going to highlight the whole sample by hitting Control A on my keyboard, and then you want to hit Control Alt and C. This is just going to consolidate the whole track into a WAV file. Great, so now we have the whole sample rendered out like this, and it's super nice to have it rendered out inside the project because then you can play around with the pitch and so on. So since I liked how the sample sounded pitched down by 2 semitones, I'm just going to start off by pitching it down first. So now we have the sample pitched down. Now you definitely want to up the volume on the sample. So now something you guys definitely need to be doing on your samples is to make sure your samples are loud. So the way I like going about this is just by either normalizing it like this, or you can just turn it up right here. So I like having it at about 6 to 3 dB. Now that we have the sample nice and loud, we also have it marked and tagged. You can pretty much save your samples and make sure you render them out correctly. Now I just want to show you guys a quick thing. Since we tagged or marked the sample, you can see it has these orange type of markers right here. And this is super nice for people that want to use your sample. But they can basically just come in and slice on each mark, because sometimes when you're making samples, you have sounds that actually start a bit later inside the sample. Sometimes the instrument actually wouldn't be playing before like the middle of the sample, but this marker right here still shows where you're supposed to cut it, just so it fits nicely inside the sample. Trust me, it's actually going to make the job for the beat maker way easier, and then they're actually going to prefer your samples in front of others. And if your samples are easy to use, they're definitely going to prefer your samples instead of others. So now we have the basic structure, the pitch and everything. Now the last thing I want to do is just to mix a little bit of the master. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and put this on a 10th channel rack. Now I definitely don't do this every time, but sometimes I just want to add some extra spice to the sample. So I mainly like adding some fresh air. Just a tiny bit, like 4%, and about 6 to 7% on this one. You guys can also add some saturation or maybe like an imager, just to make sure the sound is nice and wide. That's basically just some small tricks you guys can do to make the master sound even better. But now we pretty much have the sample done like this. Now all I want to do is basically just to save it and make sure we render it out correctly. So the way I go about saving and naming my samples is super easy. So I actually just have a Beats 2022 folder right here, and then I have every month of the year right here. Now I can go into October to show you guys an example. So when I go into my October file, I have the FLP, MP3 and WAV file of the beats, and then I have a 5th folder right here, which is the loops. So when I go into loops, I again have FLPs, MP3s and waves. So for this one, we're just going to go into the FLP folder. Now here you can see basically how I label and name my samples. So the way I go about doing this is basically just having a number first. So this is just basically indicating which number the sample is. I also like putting in brackets that it's a sample or a loop. If you guys are maybe making starters for different producers, you can just put starter right here. But I like putting in loop. It's basically just super short and simple. Then I just want to have my Instagram @ right here, beatsbymarko. Now when it comes to naming the samples, you guys can definitely name your sample whatever you want, but the name is definitely important because it's going to inspire the producer that's using your sample. So for this one, we can just call it sauce, BPM 123. You guys can type in BPM or just leave it like this. People usually understand what the numbers are. And now for the key, you just type in what key it is. So in this case, it's D minor. So this is basically how I go about naming my samples. So now we basically have this whole section right here. We just want to render it out. So we're just going to hit Control and R on our keyboard. So then we can just render it in our wave loops folder. And the way I render it, I just keep these settings, just hit MP3 and wave right here. I know people that use like the 512 point sync resampling quality, but I'm just keeping it at 32 right here. The thing is, if you're using 512, it's just going to make it bigger and you seriously can't even hear a difference. So just keep it at 32 and use the same settings we have right here. Then you can just hit start to render, and that's pretty much it for the sample. So thank you guys so much for watching the video. I really hope this helped you guys to prepare your samples for placements. So if you guys have any other questions, just leave them down in the comments below. Also, make sure to check out my website. It's BBMarko.com. The link is down below. You guys can get plenty of free sample packs, drum kits, and so on. So just make sure you check it out if you're interested. Besides that, I pretty much hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I'll see you guys next time.